Hello, I'm Beau Simmons, editor of the Stillwater News Press. This is In the Newsroom, a production in partnership with Studio Stillwater. And I am joined today with news editor Tanner Holubar.
Hey, how's it going?
City editor Michelle Charles.
Hello.
And reporter Ashlynd Huffman.
Hello.
Okay, and then I thought today maybe we're talking about is our format too stringent? I don't know. You know, we're talking a little bit about the format. Is it a little too pointed? So we'll try to just sort of be a little more crosstalk, a little more. I don't know how we want to call it, but
A little more conversational,
yeah,
sort of more like we are.
I don't want to like I'm not grilling everybody, right? Like I'm not just this sort of point and shoot sort of quick fire stuff, right?
Like we're giving a book report.
Right. So, so with that being said, we can sort of update maybe people on our goings on. I think you mentioned that our publisher, Jill Hunt, she announced her retirement officially. She's officially announced her retirement, not officially resigned from our newspaper, but
Correct.
so
Correct.
we wish Jill the best of luck, and I think I said this to her, but it's worth noting that she took over just, I think, before things got really weird here, right?
Oh, she stepped in. Can you
Not
imagine?
here specifically. Weird in our industry, not
Yeah.
just weird here, weird everywhere.
Weird in the whole world.
Yeah. So she took it over at probably one of the toughest times we've ever seen, when you really don't know. You got everyone is hunkering down, so you're thinking, how does this affect newspaper sales? How does it affect advertising? What's going to happen? Are we going to be here next month? So thank you, Jill, for
Thank you, Jill.
getting us through that part.
Thank you, Jill. I honestly don't know that. I mean, she had been here since 1998. And I mean, I don't know anyone else who has her breadth of knowledge about every aspect of this newspaper and what it takes to put a newspaper out every day, which is really impressive. And honestly, I don't know if there's anyone else who could have steered us through the last year, especially after just stepping into that publisher role. So I have felt incredibly grateful to have her, and she will be missed. What about you, Ashlynd? Are you still about to cry?
Oh, I'm just not thinking about my emotions.
You're just bottling them up,
Yes.
just stuffing them down.
Probably
That's
get
right.
Taco Bell to
That's
fill the
what we
void.
teach. Yeah, stuff it way down there.
And fill it with Taco
Yeah,
Bell.
bottle all that stuff up. Yeah.
What about you, Tanner?
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a weird scenario, I mean, we've seen a few changes with the publisher over the last maybe 5 years or so, at least in terms of having, somebody who's here, then we have a regional publisher who's maybe still overseeing us. So we went from that to then having another person who was here every day. And so getting used to that again was kind of nice. And then it's going to be very strange to have somebody else in that office. I mean, Jill's just kind of she's like sunshine, she's
Sure.
always in a good mood. You walk in, she's always saying, hey, I mean, even some of the days where she had to make some of the tough decisions, she's still kind of carrying herself the same way. And, there were a lot of tough decisions to make last year, so
Boy, that's for sure.
I wouldn't have wanted to make any of them myself. So,
And the thing is, there is a kind of strength in that because, people see someone who's always like positive and upbeat. And I think a lot of times they think, oh, yeah, that's just how that person is. No, that's not easy. They're just making the decision not to take their crap out on you. They've just decided that it's not everyone else's problem. And, one of the things that I want to thank Jill for as much as anything is like how much she cared about everything and how much interest and how much she really cared about everyone who worked here. She got us working bathrooms. We were down to a really weird bathroom situation where we each gender only had one working restroom, and they were on opposite sides of the building. And then, it was just strange. There was, some deferred maintenance, and she took care of that. She was here in this building. She cared, and she fixed the things that made our lives easier on a day-to-day basis.
I like though that the part you can smile and do what you got to do, and sort of it's like you're on the life raft, right? You're not going to be
Yes.
going, oh, we're doomed. Sorry, everyone.
Game over, man. You can't do that.
We're just gonna lay out here in the sun and let it bake us. No.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah, you gotta be a little optimistic.
So Jill. Bye, Jill.
And our next thing is we got to announce this in the paper. Well, when did that come out? The Tuesday, was it the Tuesday edition or Thursday edition? I can't even remember now. Our project on sexual assault, the lack of prosecution, which doesn't just affect Payne County, but it's more of a common theme about how tough it is for women to get justice in those instances. And we had, I think, a 7 or 8 part series for this, and that won our national award as a public service project. And the person doing the legwork, pulling most of the weight, Ashlynd Huffman. What'd you think, Ashlynd, when you won that? I think, what was it she said? No way, all caps.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
When I texted that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's still kind of shocking because I didn't expect that. But it was a group effort. Everybody.
That's what they all say.
Yeah, but I mean, you worked your tail off. I mean, you worked really hard for a really long time to put that together.
It did. I mean, it was several months in the making, right? I mean, let's see, what we published late November, early December. When did we actually get those?
December 5th, I believe.
Okay, that was a
first Saturday in December.
And then a couple times a week after that.
Yeah.
And we got most of it in to the 2020 calendar year.
Yeah.
But you first started pulling records for that.
I started keeping track of all the rape investigations in January of 2020, and then I started filing open records probably when we came back to work from the stay-at-home stuff.
So January 2020, and I think you were officially on the payroll November 2019.
Yeah.
So you were 2 months in, and we said, "Hey, here's a big project, kid." Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean, what did you find about it? I mean, as you started digging into this stuff, what really piqued your interest? What made you think that this was a thing that we should do?
I noticed when I was looking at the police reports, 90% of them were women who knew their attacker, and those were the ones that were not getting prosecuted. It would have a solid police report, and then for whatever reason, it wouldn't get prosecuted because it was a he said, she said situation.
Right. The acquaintance, what do they call that? Something
Acquaintance rape.
Yeah, acquaintance rape, and it kind of boils down to that raises the difficulty for investigators, for prosecutors.
Yeah,
for
because
all
the
these
argument, I mean, if he says, oh, yeah, we had sex, but it was consensual. So that's where it's mixed up. So his argument is consent. Hers is rape. It's whatever the jury wants to decide. So
well, and it's kind of complicated, right? Because when we sat down and talked with the DA and the assistant district attorney,
so you say jury, it does not get that far. That was kind
usually
of that was kind of the crux of your reporting was.
Yeah, usually they don't get to juries. I've had one rape trial, and they convicted him to 5 years, which is the minimum for a rape sentence for adults.
Right.
So.
I mean, one of the things they said is that it's so hard to prove because, I mean, you're usually not going to be involved in a situation that would result in a rape charge in public.
Yeah,
it takes place
there's not
in
usually
private.
evidence. Even if you get a SANE exam, there's not always injury to your genitals or, any leftover stuff. So, yeah, usually there's not a lot of evidence to collect.
And tell people what SANE stands for.
Oh, sexual assault nurse exam.
So they're specially trained nurses.
Yeah, especially nurses that collect DNA, and it goes to OSBI or other laboratories to get tested for
which was another part of the reporting because it's kind of a thing you look at. People will make whatever prejudices or decisions they're going to make about why a woman would or wouldn't report or things like that. But when you start thinking about we've still had dozens of women each year go through a SANE exam. That's not the same thing as reporting, a sexual assault or a rape. That is someone making a conscious decision to have what can be a kind of invasive procedure when you're very vulnerable, when you're already in a very vulnerable state. And that was another part of the series, right? With examining that in the whatever backlog there were for.
Yeah, because not everybody
kits.
gets sane exams, and not everybody reports the assault the day of or even the day after. Usually, I think it's 72 hours it takes for your brain to process trauma. So usually within that time frame is when they do it, and after that, there's not a lot of evidence to collect anyways.
What do you think, Michelle, going through this?
I was shocked at how, I mean, we knew there would be drop-off. We knew that, there were not, obviously, it's very difficult to get a conviction in a sexual assault case. I mean, this is a global thing. That was one thing. I mean, I did a little sidebar for the first one, and I looked at it at the state level, and it really is a global problem. Sexual violence, and it really is a crime of violence. That's one thing that people need to understand. It's not about a guy who can't say no or gets too worked up and can't stop himself, or someone being led on. It's a crime of violence, power, and control. And people need to understand that. But really, the challenges of just getting that person from, you've got a survivor who is chosen to go to the police, feel strongly enough about it to go to the police and subject themselves to that questioning and that process, which everyone who's seen a TV show knows is not going to be fun or easy. Then at every step of the way, you have this huge drop off because, from a report, well, then, you don't know how the investigation is going to turn out. And then you don't know if it's going to, and even few of those people are actually arrested. Even if the case is cleared, that was one thing because, agencies will talk about their clearance rate. But when they say clearance, that doesn't necessarily mean that it resulted in an arrest. It just means that they've investigated as much as they can investigate. And as far as they're concerned, it's either not provable or they're just not doing anymore. This is it. This is all we're going to do. Then you have to get to the DA's office where they determine whether they're going to prosecute. And we found that there were very, very few prosecutions going on out of Ashlynd, a couple hundred sexual assaults reported over the previous 2 years. There were like 5 charges filed and maybe 2
between
convictions.
5 and 7, and only 1 rape conviction, and then a couple of them.
Down, right?
A couple actually pleaded down, and one that was recently counted into the series actually was dismissed. So there, out of the 5 to 7 cases, only 1 rape conviction.
And that's
between
out of
2017 and 2019.
That's out of a couple hundred reported sexual assaults.
150 reports to be exact.
Yes.
And the thing, Tanner, were you going to weigh in there?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was what I was going to say is just, you hear the numbers, it's just such a small percentage. And I was going to say, is that even the amount of, that's just what was reported.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the things that, maybe it was too traumatic for them to report. Maybe they didn't want to tell anybody. Maybe, there's all kinds of reasons where maybe somebody didn't report. So you think, is it even more than that? And that's the shocking thing for me is just how little of them actually resulted in a prosecution or actual charges of any kind.
OSU actually just received a report of a sexual assault fondling from 1974, and so people wait a long time to report. Usually it's not a quick thing.
Well, and here's the part of it we didn't explore. I know we're probably running out of time or whatever here, but the part of it we didn't explore because it's so hard to sort of find, I think, an objective line is when people play that devil's advocate that like it's a regrettable night or it's a guy that's trying to leave or whatever those excuses are. And something we learned that really didn't go into our reporting because it was just kind of, I don't even know. It's just it's too tough to find it. Probably enough sources for something like this is if an initial, and this isn't necessarily here in Stillwater or Payne County in anywhere, but initial investigators or initial people talking to the victim who almost go in with sort of a prejudiced look into things. It's like if you believe that most of the women who are accusing someone of rape are lying about this, you've already prejudiced yourself, right? I mean, so how can you look at that with sort of open eyes to how can you treat every
I mean,
case
that's kind of what the
with
DA's
fresh
office
eyes?
said. They made the argument that a lot of rapes are made up, and so I got all the cases from Stillwater PD that were unfounded, which means lack of evidence. There was no evidence anything happened, and the stack was so small compared to the cases that were exceptionally cleared or cleared by arrest, or I think those were suspended. So, I mean, there wasn't basis for that, and I kind of talked to an expert, John Fober, I believe. And he even said, he's like, that's not right. I mean, why would you go through reporting a rape just to say, oh, it didn't actually happen?
But we talked to a couple of people who are involved in the process in an official capacity or had been in the past, who basically said, these are girls who, they have regrets for whatever reason. They're worried about being slut shamed. Someone actually brought up a scenario where a girl gets drunk, has sex in her dorm room, her roommate's there, she's embarrassed, she doesn't want to, and so then she decides that she's been raped. Or, her friends find out that she hooked up with somebody. And so she decides, I have to say that I was raped, or they'll think badly of me. Or she cheats on her boyfriend or whatever, but it's always the girl's fault. I mean, when they tell these stories, it's always the girl's fault. And she always made a bad decision and then wants to ruin someone's life over it. And, when you have people who are involved in the process who have that point of view or who seem to automatically
you're setting yourself up to not believe women.
Yes,
right?
It is. It's like they're looking at everything through a filter. And I understand that you have to look at, is this a case? Is this a provable case? Is there evidence? But I mean, when you're automatically doing that, I mean, it's very possible for someone to be a legitimate victim and the case still not be provable. It doesn't have to be this person trying to compensate for something or making something up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still waiting on a case from October that was sent to the DA's office in October of a roommate situation where she reported rape by her roommate, male roommate, and the DA's office will not even respond to me about it. Where is this case?
I don't know.
But I've got to go to court.
It's a news nugget. Okay. Ashlynd is run out of time. She's got other things to report on, other court cases.
She has to go cover a hearing.
And she leaves with a frustrating tale.
She says it's just annoying.
Of wanting a response. Didn't get it.
Which is so often the case.
It happens.
Yeah, it does.
That's the business.
It does. But yeah, it was a good series though. She worked really, really hard on it. There were a lot of documents to gather. There were a lot of interviews to do. There were a lot of people to try to track down. And the more we dug into it, the more we looked at it, the more frustrating it got and the worse it looked. I kept thinking, she's going to find something good here. She's going to find something. And there was like literally so little positive that we found out of the whole process.
Right. You want to be able to have solutions journalism, right?
Exactly.
That's sort of the goal is,
sure,
can you make a change for the public good,
exactly.
with your reporting. And yeah, sometimes it's kind of doom scrolling, when you're as a journalist, when you're reading through these things. And
sometimes you have to just write it off as, okay, we're raising awareness of a problem and maybe some solutions develop out of this. And you just have to hope that it has some impact. Also, Ashlynd did do an interview with a survivor of sexual assault within the context of a domestic relationship, right? They had an ongoing relationship. And, that was a tough one too. I mean, the thing is, human relationships are complicated. And, when people hurt each other, it's not always clear cut or it's hard to prove because, as I said, they don't do it in public. They're not going to do it in the middle of a mall or something. So it makes it really tough and law enforcement. One thing, I was really impressed with how far I believe law enforcement has come, at least at Stillwater Police Department, in terms of their investigators and how they do take sort of a trauma-informed approach to dealing with people who make reports of sexual assault. I was very impressed with that. I think there's been a lot of training. There's a lot more understanding now. I think in the past there were, times when someone would come in and report, and it was almost like they were being cross-examined because the investigator
Right.
felt like they had to
Yeah.
probe to see, if they were really telling the truth or if this was going to be a good case or whatever. And by good, I mean just provable, a strong case. And now there's, I believe, a lot more support baked into the process of at least making. Now, they can't guarantee you're going to get the outcome you want. They can't guarantee any sort of justice, however you view that. But they can certainly try to traumatize you less as you go through this process.
That is a good point. Yeah, maybe things are changing a little bit, but
Yeah.
I mean, does that happen with other crimes? If you report if you report your tractor stolen, do the police come and try to figure out if you're lying to them about your stolen tractor?
Okay, if you get robbed, if you get mugged or something like that, are they going to come to you and say, "Well, your wallet was looking pretty fat, and you were wearing a pretty nice watch. Don't you think you were kind of asking for it?" I mean, nobody does that to a victim of robbery.
We hope some good comes of it. We're glad the reporting was recognized. And,
Absolutely.
because a lot of work went into it.
Well, and I want to note that Ashlynd is 1 year out of college.
Right.
I mean, who the heck wins something like this their first year out of college? I mean, that really shows the level of work that she put into this. I mean, we all helped her a little bit, but if she wouldn't have been willing to put in the work, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have come together like it did. So kudos to her. All congratulations. And, we're very proud.
Terrific.
Yeah. Yay.
Tanner, what'd you learn this week? Or what do you got coming up?
One story that I've been working on, the OSU Art Museum over there on Husband Street. It's right near downtown. I've been there a few times, and it's a pretty cool museum. It's free. It's open to the public. And basically they have ways of putting their permanent display, collection on display, as well as, having traveling exhibitions coming in there. But a big thing with this museum, I think it's only been open for about 7 years. And a big thing for, because there is an OSU art museum on campus, the Gardner Gallery and the Bartlett Center. But that particular building doesn't have all the correct specs to store all of the artwork, things like, the climate control, things,
Sure.
To store a lot of these things,
Right.
So that was a need for a long time, as this collection started to grow. And I think they've got like 6,000 objects of artwork now. I think they started with about 3,000, even just like less than 10 years ago, so they've,
So their permanent collection is really growing.
It's really grown a lot, and,
Okay.
and really a lot of what that has been is, alumni, former professors who had worked there, they'll donate works of art, so, they got like 12,000 or 1,200 objects of Native American art from one donor, so it's kind of like they're getting these big donations, so I guess, so I just kind of went over there and got a kind of a cool tour of their vault that they call it, kind of where they have all these paintings, all these different things, and it's really just kind of interesting because that building used to be the post office.
It did, I remember.
Yeah, it was the post office for about a little over 50 years, from 1933 until 1978.
Mm-hmm.
And then OSU and then it was office buildings and things, for about 20 or 30 years. And I think OSU bought it in 2010.
It's really one of the best looking spots in town,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It
And
really
they-
is.
Right,
I mean, what a pretty post office we used
Yeah.
to have, too.
Right, and they even have they still call it the Postal Plaza right out there in
They
front,
do.
So, and one cool thing about the interior of the building is they I guess there was an extension put into it, the post office in the 60s, and a big part of the architecture firm that came to try to make it into, to take it and try to upgrade it to be an art museum. One of the big things that they wanted to do was try to show where the building, the original walls were, where the difference is for the, so that's kind of an artistic way to sort of show the history of the building, where you can go in there and you see different tones of the wall, and it's like, okay,
Oh, yeah.
here's the lobby where they had, all the different people lining up, or whatever. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
a cool thing. You just see the contrast between the, the building itself and everything. So yeah, it was just kind of a real cool conversation over there, talking with Kristen Duncan, who's their marketing person, and Arlette Cleric, who's the head, who's one of the curators over there. So it's just a very interesting museum. That's, they always have different exhibitions going on. They've got stuff in the
What
summer.
is the lifespan of an exhibition? Like 6 months?
Yeah,
They rotate?
roughly right around there. I mean, I think
They
they'll
do a couple of different ones.
yeah,
a
I
year.
mean, they'll start one in maybe January,
Yeah.
and I think they usually span about the semester's length, but they'll do stuff into the summer, they'll have stuff, and they do stuff for, local school groups and things like that, so they really try to put on, an exhibition in the most engaging way possible, trying to make it interesting for people, like I guess one I think they've had up, it's about, I can't remember. It has a lot to do with water. I can't remember the exact name of it, but basically this artist made all these artworks on things out of things that she found washed up on the beach, so there's, life jackets and all kinds of bottles, so, and trying to make in these different sort of things with it. So you just kind of see, different examples of sort of like a theme that they put together for, for an exhibit, and I've talked with people over there. There was a guy who was featured, who had been an animator on the Matrix movies, so it's kind of
cool.
like, so they host some pretty cool things over there, over at the OSU Museum of Art.
Well,
So,
and if you go in there, you can see they let the age of the building show, and when they did the remodeling, they left some of those raw elements. So there's areas where you can see beams. There's areas where you can see raw concrete pillars.
Exactly.
You can see, different. It's almost like the strata, right? Looking at the life of the building. I remember going there for a show of quilts, which you would think, okay, well, these were not your grandma's quilts. These were really cool artistic quilts. And I mean, some very high concept, very creative, very unique things. There was one that had LED light elements, and different parts of it would light up. I mean, it was really taking fiber art to the next level. And
These aren't your granny's quilts.
not your granny's quilts.
Oh,
no.
boy.
And I guess one other thing I just remembered that is kind of just a cool historical aspect of that museum is there's a mural in there that's basically been in there since I think the early 60s. It was painted by a woman named Grace Hamilton. She was basically commissioned by the post office to do that. And there were a few times where that mural was almost taken down,
Oh, wow.
And I think there were a lot of efforts to keep it there. And it's basically a mural that kind of shows the history of Payne County. That's even kind of its title, so she had studied all these historic photographs and all these things to paint this mural. And so it's still there. And then in 2013, on the reverse side of that same wall, Yadika Star Fields actually painted his kind of response to it almost and added a very Native American kind of theme to it where he really wanted to kind of show that Native American history of Payne County, so it's kind of a cool contrast that they've got, and that's kind of one of the things you see kind of right when you go in there, so I found that very cool that they just sort of have these contrasting murals that are sort of the same idea but just different depictions
Different
from
sides of the same
yeah,
coin.
exactly, almost exactly, and they're almost different sides of the same wall, exactly.
Oh,
almost
wow.
literally, so it's
That's very
pretty
cool.
interesting. So
Well, and people should know that this is completely free. I mean, and you can go in there anytime it's open, and the staff is very welcoming. It's not a place where you feel like, you're not, if you're not wearing formal clothing, you're not allowed in. They welcome families. They welcome children. There's a children's area where there are toys and books. There's actually an
Specific
area.
days too, right?
Yeah,
For
and there are
kids,
days
yeah.
where they have family activities and
Yeah.
they have arts activities for kids. I mean, with COVID, things have been a little bit, I think they've been giving like kits that people
yes,
take
that's
home.
what I was about to say. Is these kind of they give them everything they need, and it's kind of this concept where you do it, you prove that you've done the artwork, and then you can come back and you get the next one. So it's kind of a fun thing that
That's
at least
cool.
if people are trying to get kind of sort of that experience, they can still kind of stop
That's-
by and get something.
That's
for their
OSU
kids.
putting that land grant outreach spin on everything.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've had, workshops like sketching workshops, and they have, talks with visiting faculty members and things like that. So as we move past COVID and things start to open up more, hopefully some of those things will start to come back. There's also a whole bank of computers that has access to Adobe Creative Cloud where you can use InDesign and Photoshop and things like that. And they're public terminals that people can just come in and use, which is super cool. And that is funded by a grant. And that's in that children's area over in the back. So it's a great resource for the community. And anyone who hasn't been in there, really just walk in. They will welcome you with open arms. And it's a pretty cool space. It really is.
Right. And it's a lot of volunteers, students who are trying to kind of get their foot in the door, or if they want to do some sort of, museum work, so it's, it's really just kind of a lot of hard work from people who aren't really getting paid a whole lot to do it. But, it's a really interesting thing for anybody who would be interested in checking it out. I recommend it for sure.
I agree.
Last thing, Michelle, we've been given an assignment, something kind of cool. We don't even know if it's not necessarily in our area, but we said, heck, we'll do it. It was this, what was going on? We got a letter from the Navy, and we don't get those that often.
Not that often. Yes, during World War II, the Battle off Samar, which is actually, it's been billed as the largest naval battle in history. Now, this was a series of skirmishes over like 1,000 square miles in the ocean off the Philippines. It was basically the battle to retake the Philippines. And there was a captain, Ernest E. Evans, who hailed from Oklahoma, was born in Oklahoma. And the information that I'm finding shows that he was Native American, half Cherokee, 1/4 Creek, attended the U.S. Naval Academy. Anyway, he was the captain of the USS Johnston, which was one of the ships that was sunk in this battle. Behaved very heroically, put himself and his ship in harm's way, which is what it was intended for. He said that when the ship was commissioned. He said, this is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to put myself in harm's way, and anyone who is not prepared to do that should get off now. Basically, they knew what their job was, and there was a big Japanese fleet coming, and they knew that they had to do what they could do, at least try to slow them down. And he gave his life doing that, as did many men that day. And anyway, the ship has been missing for a long time. It sank. They could not locate it. And
he was a Medal of Honor winner.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So
among other things. Bronze Star, U.S. Medal of Honor, multiple awards. But anyway, Oklahoma's own. He's been... He's well known in military history. There's actually a type of there is a ship named after him, the USS Evans. I'm trying to remember what class it is. It's like an escort ship or something like that. And so he's not been forgotten by the U.S. Navy, but his family kind of moved around a lot. He wasn't necessarily well known in Oklahoma, or well remembered in Oklahoma as one of our native sons.
I think what we know for sure, we're not entirely sure where he was born, because the Navy believes it is Pawnee.
Right.
Some historians think it may be at Shawnee. I think you talked to some guy.
Right.
But they do know that he is a Muskogee High graduate.
Exactly. Born in Oklahoma, graduated from Muskogee High School, Central High, in about like 1926. So, yes, so we're working on that story, trying to get it put together, because they think that they have located the wreckage, positively identified the wreckage of the USS Johnston. And, 2019 was the 75th anniversary of that battle. So there was a little attention paid to it back then. And some wreckage had been found, but they couldn't positively identify which ship it was. And it looks like now it has been identified as the Johnston. So it's kind of Johnston. So it's bringing all of this back up. And we're looking into Ernest E. Evans, who died captaining his own ship at the age of 36. I mean, which seems like quite an accomplishment.
What are you
at
doing
that
with
age.
your life, Tanner?
He's not on track to captain a ship.
I only got 7 years to go if I'm going to do something similar to that.
You better learn how to sail.
Right, but that's kind of the interesting thing about something like this, where they may have known that this ship was down there, maybe I'm sure maybe some had speculated that this was the Johnston, but to actually identify that this was it kind of, and they've been able to honor, his memory and his legacy. I mean, his son was even in the Marine Corps, which I think is a very cool, sort of following in his father's footsteps in a way, but I think this almost adds to that legacy a little bit, where at least you kind of now have a more concrete thing to kind of, that they can even have photos of the wreckage to put with, displays of, his, if he had a uniform on display, or just photos of him or anything, where it's now they can just kind of connect that and just honor him
it's not
even
that,
more.
But to me, you're bridging the gap between past and present.
Right.
It's just another way to keep telling the story, so it doesn't get forgotten, because even this, this generation, the greatest generation, we're losing them pretty quickly. So even, there were survivors on that ship.
Right.
There
But
were.
we don't know how many of those would even be alive today, because he was born in 1908.
1908.
Yeah, so
Right. I mean,
he
if
wouldn't
someone
have
was
lived today.
18
Yeah.
and on
Yeah.
that ship, now that was one
Right.
of the things, though. Most of the sailors on that ship
Were
had not been in
younger.
combat before. They were young. They were inexperienced. So there could be some young fellows, but 44 survivors out of a 327-man crew. So the chances of there being very many of them left are pretty slim. So, but the amazing thing is, I think the story of how the ship was located and identified is going to be absolutely fascinating. Because when I first saw a story about the wreckage possibly being located, that was in 2019. The U.S. Navy said, okay, we found something. We can't positively say it was the Johnston. More than 20,000 feet deep on the edge of one of those big trenches where the ocean just drops off.
Wow.
Yes. So it took...
fortunate as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
it took a specialized crew with one of those submersibles that was almost at the end of its capacity to go any lower in order to find it. So it's kind of amazing that it was found.
I don't know if it really resonates with, or not resonates. It's probably going to resonate with everyone who
It's
has an
not a
interest in
local
history.
story
But it's, yeah, not
necessarily.
necessarily a local story, but I think anyone in any market would kind of be interested in reading it. Kind of like Tanner's thing with the Oak Ridge Boys. You know,
Yes.
yeah, that's not super local, but a lot of people think it's pretty cool. To how many people even know? Oh yeah, 40-year anniversary of Elvira. I didn't realize that. Hey, here's a story. I'll read it. Sure, why not? We can do
Exactly. Well, you've heard,
Yeah.
I mean, almost everybody's heard of the Oak Ridge Boys.
that. Right.
Right.
You know, and just the fact that they're still making music, I think is, pretty cool.
As you know, we are hyper local. You know, a lot of
Right.
times we will be like, well, there's not much of a, if they're not from here, or if they're, like a lot of the bands I've talked to, it's because they're playing at the Tumbleweed or whatever. But sometimes there are those times where it just sort of transcends that, where you're like, that would be interesting. There's enough people here who are interested in a group like the Oak Ridge Boys or something like that, where there's just, it almost just makes it kind of feel like, yeah, it is worth just doing it. Why not?
Well,
It adds a balance to everything else.
Well,
I
and
think.
can't you kind of expand the definition of hyperlocal to not just it happened right here, to it's of interest to
Right.
people
That's
who
our-
live here.
Exactly.
That's our lesson for the day. The lesson we end with, right?
Yeah.
Even if a story isn't born in Stillwater and Payne County, if it
can't-
affects us, it's still a local story.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, that's
All right.
gonna do it for us. Thanks everyone for joining me. Thanks Chris Peters for producing Studio Stillwater. I've been Beau Simmons with Tanner Holubar, Michelle Charles, and Ashlynd Huffman. Thank you for joining us in the newsroom.